Here I am back in my Crane's Roost studio today. Have my little gimbal out so I don't have to hold my phone. Need to start using this gimbal. I bought it, it's a really nice gimbal, and I never really use it that much, you know. But having my little caramel frappuccino this morning. I haven't had one for a while. Actually, I try to avoid Starbucks in general these days, you know, no matter what, just because it's such a waste of money, you know. I used to live at Starbucks, but especially, you know, the prices just keep going up and up and up. But it's not the best stuff for you anyways. Like Bill Maher said one time when he was talking about how fat we all are in America, that, you know, our morning coffee has now become a milkshake with whipped cream on it, you know. So I don't know. I used to usually have this place to myself around now, but now we got all kinds of like homeless people hanging out and stuff. But I guess that kind of brings me to today's topic. Something I've been planning to make a video about for a while, which is what to do when you're facing hard times. You know, it's easy to find yourself in a situation, and pretty much most people in this world at one time or another find themselves in a really tough situation where they don't know how they're going to make it through, you know, and really hard decisions to make. But the main thing to remember is that ultimately what it comes down to is you only have two choices. You know, when you find yourself in a tough situation. And what that ultimately comes down to is that you can either lay down and die, or you can keep on going, you know. When you break it down to its simplest elements, that's the choices that you have, you know. It's obviously not that simple, because there are lots of different elements to things. You don't know, that doesn't have anything at all to do with the exact steps you might have to take to get yourself out of that situation. And all of those, you know, details. But in terms of your ultimate attitude, you only have two choices. You know, you can either keep going or you can lay down and die. You know, there's an acronym that some of you may have heard of, you know, called FIDO, F-I-D-O, which means fuck it, drive on. And that's the attitude you kind of have to have in life sometimes. Doesn't matter what's happening, what the problems are, how bad the situation is. You know, sometimes you just have to say fuck it and keep on marching, you know? That's the only thing you can do. And really, a lot of times you could say that you only have one choice, because for a lot of us, the stopping and laying down and dying and just not worrying about trying to keep going anymore isn't really an option. So when you look at it like that, what choice do you have, you know? Like I said, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, you know? That doesn't mean it's going to be easy to keep going, because you may not know how exactly you're going to get out of a situation, but still you know that you have to keep on going. You have to keep getting up every day and putting one foot in front of the other and going and trying to do something. Maybe you're in a situation where you've lost your job, or maybe you have some added new complications, expenses and stuff that you don't know how to cover, and you're not sure exactly how you're going to get through that. But if you're not going to just lay down and die, you have to keep going. And it may not be easy some mornings to get up and go. You know, you may have a whole, you know, period of time, a week, weeks, months, where you don't really feel like you're accomplishing anything, and you're just kind of laying around depressed about things. But you have to keep going, because what other choice do you have? You know, and you have to also understand when you talk about being depressed, there's a difference between clinical depression and just having the blues. You know, I was talking to someone one time when I was going through some crap in my life, and you know, he asked me, well, are you still have activities that you enjoy, still find pleasure in the things that you enjoy and things like that? And I was like, yeah, you know. And he says, yeah, he says, you're not depressed. He says, you just have the blues, you know. Everybody wants to act like every time they go through a rough patch, they have some kind of clinical depression or something. And it's not a lot of times. We all get depressed, if you want to use that word, you know, not in a clinical sense. You know, just get down on ourselves, down on life, thinking, what's the point, you know, am I ever going to get ahead? Am I ever going to get this squared away? And it makes things tough sometimes. But ultimately, it comes down to whether or not you're a person who's going to just give up or keep going. And for the vast majority of us, really, all the way down through human history, for the vast majority of us, the answer has been, we're going to keep going. The thing you have to understand about yourself as a human being is that we got here. I'll have a sip of this. Probably not the best thing human civilization ever created. But we, if you look back just through the development of the human species, the reason we are here today is because our ancestors had what it takes to survive. The people who are here today, all of us, every single one of us, our ancestors were people who were survivors. They found a way to survive. And there are different ways to do that. It isn't all just, you know, like tooth and nail, you know, fighting viciously to survive and prevail against, you know, weaker creatures. There are a lot of different aspects to survival. You know, some of it is physical, being strong enough and motivated enough to fight and win in those types of physical encounters. But there's also a lot of other subtleties to surviving. You know, even you look back through the times in our history where women were basically treated like property and so forth, and like the spoils of war. You know, think of what it took for a lot of those women to be survivors, and how they had to learn to cope with horrible situations and prevail and keep going and make sure that the situation wasn't going to be the end of them. They were going to get through. And people here who are, you know, living today are their descendants. Every single one of us that's here today, we have what it takes genetically to be a survivor and to win. Winning, of course, today, you know, has a lot of dramatic, you know, connotations applied to it. But, you know, a lot of times being a winner is just surviving and making it through and having a life and being able to enjoy yourself. It doesn't mean you're the ultimate, you know, rich master of the universe and everything you see around you is your domain. You have to learn to accept little victories when you're trying to get through things and survive. And that's basically just the message that I've been thinking about for a long time, that I wanted to do a video about, because I've been through situations myself where, man, really screwed things up, you know. And tough situations in life that some of them were my fault, some of them were things that were done to me by other people. And even there, you know, you might go through a period of time where you're down and you know, kind of depressed, once again, if we want to use that word, about things. And eventually you realize, especially if it's something that was done to you by other people, the people who did those things to you, they've already moved on, you know, because people will do things to you to screw up your life, stab you in the back, betray you, and while you're still sitting around, you know, a year or two later, you know, thinking how much they ruined your life, they've already moved on. All you're doing is giving, you know, those people power over you when you keep thinking about it, and you just have to eventually reach the point where you say, that's it, I'm done, you know, letting those people still live on in my thoughts and control my life, because that's what they're doing. If you're sitting around feeling horrible about things, I remember one time, you know, saying to my mom actually about some people, some of the shit that they had put me through in life. You know, why couldn't they have just put a bullet through my head and killed my body too, instead of just taking my life, you know? Because that's the way I felt at the time, which is overly dramatic, you know, the over dramatic, you know, theatrical response to things, especially that young people have. And you know, the shit is not the end of the world. If you're still breathing, you know, then honestly, you just have to say fuck it and keep going, you know, because as long as you're alive and you still have the potential to get through a situation, there's hope, and you can still be a survivor, and you can still be a winner in that situation. Things may not work out exactly how you wanted, but you know, you may find yourself doing things you don't want to do. You know, if you're in a really serious, like, financial situation, and crazy things that have happened, you know, you might find yourself, you know, where if you keep trying to pay on all the things that you've gotten behind on, and situations that have developed, you might never get out of it for the rest of your life. And so maybe you're in a situation where you're thinking, oh man, you know, the only way out of this is to do a bankruptcy or something, but you hate the thought of doing that. But you know, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do to survive, whatever it takes, and find a way to give yourself a fresh start. The little squirrels running around with nuts or something here. But there is usually a path forward. As long as you're still breathing, there is some kind of a path forward. You may not like it in some respects, but you may find then further down the road that maybe that was just like the best thing, the way you ended up having to handle it just to get through it. You know, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. It's like I talked about with, like, you know, bankruptcy. You know, people don't like the thought of doing something like that, you know, but maybe you find yourself in a situation where you've lost your job, things are stacking up, and the only way you can handle things is to get into some kind of a plan where you can, you know, restructure things and get rid of all those interest payments, or you're never going to get out of it, you know. You have to always be thinking, though, and finding some way to make it through. What exactly that answer is going to be different in every situation. And you know, you might feel bad about, like, going on with the bankruptcy thing, and you might think, well, what are people going to think about me and things like that. You know, on the other hand, you know, if it makes you feel any better, you can look at people like Donald Trump, who've done, you know, multiple bankruptcies, and half the country still worships them, you know, and talks about what a great businessman they are. So the tools that are available to you, sometimes you just have to take advantage of them. And it's the same in any situation. You know, that's just one specific example of things that, especially these days, a lot of people are having to deal with. You look around, you know, you see the economy and the things that are happening to people's jobs, the price of owning a house, renting an apartment, having a car, insurance, all these different things. It just keeps going through the roof. You know, you get the people for the administration standing up there on television telling you how we just need to do a better job of messaging, because people don't realize how great they've got it these days, you know. and they're idiots. But they think that they can pull the wool over people's eyes and tell them, hey, everything's great, and oh wow, everything's fine, and we all know out here on the streets that it's not. For like the top 5-10% of the country, maybe things are just fine. They can't imagine a better time. But the vast majority of people who have to actually work for a living, normal human beings, they know everything's more expensive. What I pay for this, like $6.15 this morning. That's why I never do it anymore. Because it's silly. I usually anymore I just make my coffee at home. I hardly ever go to Starbucks. I used to practically, like I say, live there, and it's things like that you look at and you say, man, why am I wasting that money? You get rid of Starbucks when you've been going a couple times a day, and there's your meal for the day. And those are the kind of choices that more and more people are making. And I saw a really good video by Michael Bordenero. He talked about a lot of these retail companies or these places that they've been doing really good. Their total sales are up, but if you look at what's going on, the number of customers has actually dropped off. The reason that the total sales has gone up is because everything's gotten more expensive. So even though they're selling less of it, they're still taking in more dollars than they were, say, like a few years back or whatever. And people keep pointing to those dollar numbers to try and make it sound like everything's going great. But when you start to analyze things, you realize, nah, it's not so great, because nobody's going anymore. The only reason they're keeping the actual net income up is because the price on everything has gone up, which means that a lot of those people had to stop going there. You look at fast food restaurants, McDonald's, and all these places. People just are not going anymore because it's a waste. There was convenience before, and people were willing to pay for that just because they're busy and they don't want to cook or whatever. But we may find ourselves with people going back to more of that lifestyle we used to have, where people cook their meals at home. And it probably will actually be good for our country, because all that shit that we're eating out that's cooked in seed oils and stuff, and deep fried, and has all kinds of preservatives in it, is not what we should be eating anyways for our bodies. So that's maybe there's a silver lining in that, But I've rambled on here long enough. But just remember, if you're going through hard times, there's only really two choices, and the one of them is to lay down and die. And if you're not willing to take that choice, then you really only have one choice. That doesn't mean you're going to be super happy every day. You might be sitting around feeling sorry for yourself sometimes, but as long as you keep making progress and keep going, eventually there's that chance that you'll make it through and get to the other end and come out maybe even in a better situation than what you were before. And maybe you'll realize that the situation you are in is the way things were supposed to work out. I've always tried to pride myself, even though being raised in kind of like a fundamentalist, Christian background when I was young, on being intelligent enough not to just believe in things because I wish that they could be true, And I've tried to convince myself in a lot of ways that there is no kind of divine guidance about things and stuff like that. But on the other hand, man, I've been through things in my life where, the way it works out, and I realize, man, this was like, it's just like the way that things were supposed to be. And I can't escape that conclusion. And sometimes that's the way you just have to look at it. You don't want to be fatalistic and trust in that, that things are just going to work out. You have to keep working and trying to find a way to do things. But that's another one of those survival mechanisms within us as humans. They talk about hope springs eternal in the heart of mortal man, and that optimistic attitude, that's another one of the things that keeps us going. That's one of those genetic traits that we've got. That is why we as a species still keep getting up every day and keep going and trying to make the world a better place. And I have faith that eventually we will. You know, and you look down a far distant future, who knows what's going to happen, how much of the human race is going to survive, but we as a species will survive. And I think we're going to go great places. But before we do that, every single one of us who's here today has to keep marching on and doing our part, you know, to try and pass on our lessons, the things that we have learned. And we just have to have faith and keep marching. Drive on.